Hello, welcome to the episode of Flying High with Flutter. I'm your host, allenwyma. Today I'm with David Chen, who is a student studying in U.S.
Hello.
So you guys at home know I'm in a new location. I'm currently visiting my parents after about 3 years stuck in Hong Kong. So the connection over here is actually not that good compared to Hong Kong. So if you guys want good internet connection, check out Asia. Much better than U.S. and much cheaper for internet connection. Yeah, David, why don't you go ahead and give a quick introduction about yourself? Please go ahead.
All right. Thank you, Alan. My name is David. I'm currently a student. I'm in California, Cal Poly. It's a state school located in San Luis Obispo. Currently a third year. I'm currently interning at Adobe. I've been using Flutter for around 2 years, maybe 2 years and a little bit more. I've been working on an app called Rivals. I believe there's a link underneath. But yeah, I'm very passionate about Flutter. I love Flutter, and I'm excited to talk about it today.
Yeah, so it's kind of interesting because we originally approached you about a post you had on Reddit about accessing the file system on Flutter, and but you want to talk about desktop, which is fine. Why don't we talk a little bit more about kind of like your background? I think you said before we started the show that you actually mostly work with Flutter on mobile. Is that right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Mostly I just work on Flutter mobile since I was working on the app. But I think Flutter desktop has like huge potentials, and I mean obviously it's not like fully production ready yet. Even Flutter team says it was stable, but I believe it has like a big potential of being like the cross-platform solution for desktop and mobile.
Now you're saying the Flutter team says it's not production ready or something? Sorry, how did you say that?
I was saying the Flutter team says it is production ready. It was being merged as stable since 3.0.
No, but how stable do you actually feel it is, though?
It is very not stable. It's very not stable because there are many issues, like smaller and bigger issues. There are bugs all over the place. I feel like just even if you look at like rich text editor, there is no official rich text editor out there. Like if you want to make anything that has a text field like with some functionalities like bold, italic, images, there is no official solution. There are some third-party ones, like none of them are stable. They all are buggy. Some of them are abandoned. And if you look at some other issues, Flutter desktop currently, like in my experience, it consumes a lot of energy. I honestly have no idea like why exactly that is the case. Maybe because of the render engine. It has to like always render things at 60 frames a second.
Why would the render engine have a connection to this kind of problem, though?
In my experience, sometimes like when Flutter is trying to render an animation, just like a button press, the ripple effect of a button, maybe like page navigations. Skia has to, I guess, like render all the frames, and then it has to like call the build function every time, and that compares to more of a native solution, maybe like WinForm, Qt, compared to like those solutions. Flutter would consume more energy and more just compute power.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, you can never have like what they call a silver bullet, like something that works for every single solution, right? But I mean, obviously, even with these bugs everywhere that you claim, I think you're still excited about it nonetheless, right?
Yeah, yeah, totally. I feel like the energy consumption thing that is bearable. That thing is like it's acceptable. But there's some things that are not really acceptable. If you're working with, let's say, a word processing application or some application that requires word processing, there is no real solution for you. And if you're working with like device interfaces like USB, then Flutter Desktop is probably not the right tool for you as of 2022.
Yeah, I don't know if there's an easy way to do the USB part because I'm not too sure how each platform handles USB. It's a good question because I would figure they'd be slightly different. I don't know how USB actually works across. So it's something to take a look at. But yeah, for sure. I mean, you can always drop down into native code and just interface, right, if you really need to.
Yeah, I think the plugin I posted on Reddit, that was a link you guys originally contacted me with. That was the problem I ran into when I was trying to make a file picker on iOS that picks, files from, let's say, on your iPhone or from your iCloud. And then if you have the location, if you have the path, and you try to list the files in that path, you're not allowed to, because Apple does not allow you to list paths in like places outside your sandbox, right? But there is an API that allows you to. There is an API, um, but Flutter doesn't support the API, officially. So and I realized that, oh yeah, I have to list directories outside of the sandbox. The app I'm working with requires me to. So I just figured, I've never made a plugin before. Let's try how hard it is. And turns out it was not that hard, because I just followed examples and then wrote what I needed to write, the Swift code. And then it was working. I was pretty surprised how easy it was.
Now, how easy Swift is, or how easy to build a plugin? I'm guessing probably the latter, right?
Well, yeah, Swift itself is like not easy per se, but like building a plugin, um, is a lot easier than I thought.
The funny thing is actually, with the new null safety, I think Swift is very similar to Dart now, where you have like the question mark
Yeah, I
optional,
agree.
right? So I feel it's quite similar nowadays.
Yeah, personally, I don't like Swift that much. My work currently is in Swift, and there's some like annoying things to deal with, like because Swift uses arc, automatic reference counting, so you have to deal with weak variables, strong links. So it is it's more complicated than Dart, but the null safety layer is similar.
Or really, Swift actually keeps the arc from Objective C days. Then you're saying,
Yeah,
okay, that's interesting. I guess it makes sense. I do remember this. I remember I started learning iOS before there was Arc. Or no, sorry, there was Arc, but only for desktop. There was no Arc for iOS at the time. Now they have it. So yeah, so maybe I'm very old school, I guess. So Arc, for you guys at home who don't know, is automatic reference counting. There's different ways to garbage collect within programming languages, and I think the way most people do it is probably mark and sweep, something like that, where it's like it kind of like stops everything and takes a look to see if there's any references and then removes it if there's none. The way arc or reference counting works is that you always add one for every time you're using it, and then if you don't use it, you minus one. And when the count hits zero, then it gets cleaned up, something like that.
yeah. The problem hits when you got a cycle of links between objects, and now the GC doesn't know when to collect those, interlinked objects, but they're really supposed to be garbage collected. So if you indicate a variable being a weak variable, then the link is weak. And then when the garbage collector sees a cycle with a weak link, it will collect the entire, set of objects.
Yeah, maybe it's easier for you, but like I always never really understood strong and weak. Can you talk about that for a second? Because the only thing I remembered is like I think when you connect interface builder to your code, then you would say it's weak. That's the only thing I can kind of remember from weak and strong. I don't really understand weak and strong. Do you mind to talk about that for a second?
Oh yeah, my understanding is that, so for weak variables, it has to be nullable, because the garbage collector might, just collect it. But if you indicate a link is strong, then you can make it just not null, and the garbage collector just won't touch it. Mostly when you connect, some UI element from, the story builder, it will make it a weak variable, because the page changes all the time.
Yeah, it's hard to put this into my mind because I think this is the only programming language that comes to my mind that I don't have to go into, which has strong and weak, and I have to think about it. I'm so happy we have Dart. It just feels so much
Yeah.
easier compared to strong and weakly type things and reference scouting.
Yeah, totally.
But you said your day-to-day work at Adobe is actually in Swift. Is that what you said?
Yes. I mostly just work in Swift. I do have to, write maybe Python some of the times, but mostly just Swift. I currently work in um, like I don't know if I can talk too much about it, but just like automated testing and sort of like making sure uh, like just kind of automate the test process with they run a at Adobe we use Jenkins a lot, and we try to put a lot of tasks on those CIs, because we own those machines. Well, they own those machines. I don't own those machines.
Did you learn Swift first, or did you learn Dart first? Like, which one kind of came first in your learning?
Yeah, I learned Swift first. I never learned Objective C because to me Objective C just seemed way too hard. But then, after learning Swift and learning C, Objective C seems a lot easier. The syntax initially, scared me off. Um, I feel like I still have a very shallow understanding of Swift, and all like there's a lot of language features that I definitely don't know. Um, and then I picked up Dart after Swift, but I feel like I definitely like Dart a lot more.
Now, like, did you pick up Dart only because of Flutter?
Yeah, when I was trying to make the app, the Rivals app, I wanted to sort of, because I back then we were a two-people team and two-person team, and we don't have the manpower to make an iPhone version and Android version. It just seemed too much work. We looked into different solutions like Xamarin, like React Native, Ionic, um, but none of those like they all have like their own problems, sort of. So eventually, you know, we just found Flutter.
Wait, when you say we, like, maybe we can kind of talk about this at the beginning, right? Because there's a reason why you guys went for Flutter. Is it
Mhm.
because cross-platform? Is that what kind of came to your mind?
Yeah, we don't want to just maintain two separate apps. Especially, we're not really familiar with the Android development side, part, the Android side. So I feel like we'd really like a solution that just covers if we wrote 90% the code like in this framework language, and it will cover just both platforms, and we don't have to worry about the specific parts. And Flutter really suited our needs. Uh, we looked at React Native because we both know JavaScript, and React Native seemed like really promising, even though people said things about how buggy their debuggers are or their runner is. But one of the things that kind of scared us away was that apparently widgets or components are represented differently on different platforms. And what we really wanted is this unified look that is like the guarantee that like if we write code this way, it will run the same on different platforms, on the two different platforms, instead of like using the native components.
Yeah, that's definitely something I've heard a lot about, and so many companies have actually saved money because of this. Because it's always like, okay, you have a problem with the app. Okay, what version are you using, and
Oh
also what
yeah,
platform are you using too, which is another big thing.
yeah.
Okay, so when you guys took a look at Flutter, like, what was like your guys' first thoughts actually?
And the first thought is that they had a pretty website, and that usually gives like half the story. They had a decent looking thing. They have like they look. It looks like they have good community support. It looks like it looks like the product is pretty stable. And then we tried the demo, and it works out of the box. Like without looking on Stack Overflow, just like you install it, and it actually works. And that really encourages us because I remember when the first time I tried React Native, there was some issue, um, and then I couldn't get it to work the first time. I have to like look up what went wrong and then read the error messages. Um, but yeah, at first it was hard to wrap my mind around the everything is a widget part. It just widget inside a widget thing. What really helped me the most is the 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 Flutter widget of the week videos. Like those videos help me understood like I guess like the framework of how Flutter really works. You have different widgets, each widget doing just one specific thing, and it does it well. sort of like the Unix philosophy. It just like each widget, you have so many built-in widgets, and you can also build your own widgets. Your own widgets can include more widgets. And that's a really cool idea, but it is, I guess, a really foreign idea to me.
Yeah, like I think for me, it's kind of weird that you would take widgets and combine them together to make more widgets. It just seems like they should be slower, right? Because you're just adding more widgets, but it's still super fast.
Yeah, it's insanely fast. I never really hit any performance bottleneck with just with the widgets.
Yeah, I had a couple before, but they're not too bad. To be honest, like you can still get pretty decent performance even if you're not have the most performant code. What I wanted to say was so this all of this kind of initial Flutter work was all for that Rivals app, right?
Mm,
And that app is only for iOS and Android at the moment.
yes, I feel like if we were to like try to make it, be more open to other platforms, we could. But at some point, we just start to depend on too many plugins that are just Android and iOS, and at that point, it's too hard to go back. And it makes sense for that app specifically to only work on mobile.
Yeah, because that one connects to specific trackers, right?
Yeah. Well, currently it doesn't, but we definitely plan to like connect to trackers. Um, but I think it requires it depends on Firebase. It depends on some other services that just are mobile only. Firebase used to kind of be only mobile, and then after I think in Invertase, I don't know how to pronounce like the team's name. Like they like kind of freelanced over Google Firebase, and then they took Firebase, they kind of revamped it. They added a bunch of platform supports, and now it's like more available on other platforms.
So you got the app going, right? As I think I said before the show, I don't know if you heard me okay because my connection wasn't too good at the time. I've actually done a very similar. I've done a very similar app to what you did, where we actually take
Oh,
fitness
interesting.
tracking data. Yeah, so we hook up to Strava, we hook up to Apple Health, and we also hook up to Google Fit, depending what kind of device you have. And we actually pull that data in and we sync it together. And we have leaderboards also, so it's kind of interesting. Like at a high level, it looked about the same. Yeah, exactly, it looked about the same. So it's always kind of funny that we did something very similar.
Oh yeah, how did that one go?
We learned a lot because I think, as you know, also doing this app, you sometimes actually have to dig into the native code, right? Because
Mm,
fitness tracking, it's not really a plugin that works across all platforms. It just doesn't work like that. Like iOS has their own funky stuff. People can always say no to you. You cannot always force the iOS app to ask again. And you can. It's kind of weird because what I think, if I remember correctly, for iOS, you can ask them once for fitness data, and the second time you ask, even though because they've answered before, it'll it still will act like you did ask again. And I forget what the trick was, but there's some really weird trick where it's like if they said no, you could never ask them again, or you wouldn't I think what it was, if I remember correctly, this has been a while, right? I think the way it worked was like you can ask them, and if they say no, it'll come back as a no. But if you ask again, it's going to say yes because you've already asked before. So it's very weird, like behavior. I'm trying to remember, so I may get this one wrong, and things may have changed since I've looked at this issue before. But that's what I remember at this time. And so, like, the only way that we could be sure is if we try to pull data and there was no data there after a reasonable amount of time, then we would know that we don't have permission because that's the way
wow.
iOS worked. Yeah, it's really weird. Um, there's a couple of plugins on pub.dev that actually deal with this. Like I think it's Health. I think is the one I was looking at before. That one will pull Google Fit data and also Apple Health data.
Okay.
I don't know if you ever worked with that one. Like, did you build everything from scratch, or did you use another plugin for that?
We haven't like implemented any health tracking in it. We currently just do like, user reporting as of like now. We do plan to like that's a really good information to know, like how that the trouble you went through. Um, we do plan to like add, fitness tracking data, but like it sounds like a big project, and just like working with all the, different perks of different, platforms.
Wait, so how does your app work? Is that you ask them and then they just input the data by hand?
Oh yeah, so pretty much we don't really focus on like the actual like the specific in the data too much. We focus on like whether if they, you know, did the thing that they were committed to do. Let's say like if they were committing to do let's say run for 2 weeks, like run every day. Um and then the point is to try to like find friends to, you know, to improve, like to have your friends to make you do it, because usually like the social aspect keeps you, you know, keeps you to do what you were committed to do. So you would check in, sort of like you would check in maybe with a picture, maybe with some text, and you would check in and you can see your friends check in, you know, when your friends check in, and you'll hopefully you'll, you know, build habits from doing this. So we don't currently do like any fitness tracking for now, but we definitely want to do fitness tracking. But from what you said, it seems like a difficult thing.
Yeah, a little bit difficult, but as long as you know the tricks, you should be okay. I think iOS is probably the biggest pain.
Ah, I see.
Android's not too bad. Like I said, there's actually already quite a few plugins that actually do what I told you, which is that if you're on iOS, it's going to default to Health. If you're on Android, it's going to default to Google Fit. The other thing you have to take a look at is not every device will have Google Fit, or like, sorry, will have not Google Fit, not Google Fit. So not every device is going to have um, Google services.
Oh, that's gonna be difficult if you're working like apps in
Well,
China.
you're from China, right? Yeah, you're from China, right? So
Yeah.
you're going to have to deal with that. So one thing you can try to take a look at is hooking into Samsung Health, which for the past 5 years, when I'm looking at it, they haven't actually opened up for developers yet. You have to apply, but they closed the application for the last 5 years, something crazy like
Wow.
that. And so we were never actually able to apply. And
So how do you deal with that problem? Like just not having Google services in China?
what well we actually most of our client sorry most of the people who are so it's my client, most of his customers are actually outside of China. But
Mm.
of course, there's some people because we're based out of Hong Kong, right? So of course, there's some mainland Chinese who come to Hong Kong. What we also set up for Android only, which is their own custom step tracker.
Mm.
So there's also a step tracking plugin that we hooked into. So if you're on Android, we could say, okay, do you want to use Google Fit or do you want to use our step tracker?
Okay.
If you have a step tracker on, we have to turn on in the background and count the steps and everything like that, and it's not as reliable.
I see. Do you are you currently working with a client currently in China?
Not for that app. So, but yeah, I know there's ways around it for like other things too, like the what do you call that? The push messages and push notifications, things like that. Just all kinds of stuff. I don't want to talk about. We're talking about this is not what the topic's about, right? Um, but what I do want to talk about is like you spend so much time on this app. I mean, what got you looking at Flutter Desktop now?
Oh yeah, there are a few things that I wanna just look at Flutter Desktop for. One is that Flutter Desktop is really fast in terms of compiling. So you can like really run your app, you know, run the app in the desktop version, but really just like release it as mobile, but you debug it with desktop, because everything works like hot reload, hot restart works. Everything works like the UI looks the same. You even have the perks of just trying out different screen sizes just by, you know, dragging the window sizes, you know, changing the window sizes. Um, and mostly things work just the same. Mostly, especially when you're on Mac, things work very similar because you're working with Xcode, you're working with CocoaPods. You have mostly the same environment. Sometimes like storage could work a little bit differently. On iOS, you have stricter permissions. Uh, but I feel like just by using Flutter Desktop like to debug is very efficient. It's more efficient than just using a simulator or an emulator or whatever that's called. The other reason is that I'm currently also working on another app. This is more of a personal, I guess, hobby project, like very personal hobby project. Rivals is also personal hobby project, I guess. But the new app I'm working on is sort of a Google Drive alternative because I mentioned I was in China. I lived in China. Currently, I'm in the U.S., but I would go back to China. And when I go back to China, there are no Google services, as you mentioned. Google Drive doesn't work. None of Google stuff works. None of YouTube stuff works. A lot of things just stopped working. And actually, like we kind of take those things for granted, but like when I go back, it's very difficult to get used to because there's so many services that I just don't have access to anymore. And I want to like kind of sort of retain some of those services. Um, you could use a VPN, but it doesn't work all the times. So I'm currently trying to build a Google Drive alternative. It's sort of a self-hosted Google Drive service, and I have it. And I'm trying to make this app in Flutter that works on all platforms. So that's kind of my reason of why I'm looking into Flutter Desktop.
That's a super big endeavor, right? Maybe we can kind of roll back a little bit. What I'm aware of is that there seems to be a lot of complementary service. Would I say complementary? I think complementary is the right word. Maybe English is better than mine. But basically, like we have Google Drive out here, right?
Mm-hmm.
But there has to be something similar in China, right?
Oh yeah.
I mean, there's Baidu, right? Baidu must have something similar because Baidu is basically the Chinese Google, right? So did they have a Baidu Drive or something like that?
Yes, that one works definitely. There's some issues that currently that kind of bugs me. It stops me from using it. One is that the speed is limited. You have to pay, and you actually have to pay a lot to have the full download speed. Um, the other thing is that like it's government issued. It's government. Baidu is sort of it has a government behind. So you don't want to store all the files on there. Um, I mean, you can argue that it's same for Google as well. Google is, not your own thing. It's Google. They can see your stuff, but it's generally, I guess, more open. Um, but I do think, if I have this Google Drive alternative that it's fully functional, it just works just like Google Drive. Um, but you can self-host it, then it could be just really convenient for personal use, and also it could potentially be expanded to a business model where you can host your own file and enjoy like the perks of Google Drive folder.
Sorry, before I forget, Tony Thomas, a big fan of the show, asked us a question about China.
Okay.
Yes, if I use Firebase, will the app work in China?
Oh yeah. It depends on what services you're using. Um, Most services don't work. Google or Firebase hosting works some of the times, depending on the area, because China, the internet services are divided by two big service providers. I believe one service provider supports, or at least currently, Firebase hosting works with that service provider. So it depends on which area you live. But unfortunately, most of the services don't work. So um, storage doesn't work. Firebase doesn't work. Real-time database doesn't work. Just most services don't work. That's really unfortunate.
So, but you said some services do work there. So which services do work that?
So push notification works. Um, Firebase hosting, I mentioned that works some of the times, but it's really slow. You definitely want to look for local service providers for that one. But you can still very well use Firebase cloud messaging. Is that what it's called? Push notification.
Yeah, FCM. Yeah. Well, it's good to hear because, like, I do remember I was in China for a while. I did a native app, and I think we used. Oh, I forgot the name. There was another service, a Spark or something. I forgot the name of it.
For push notifications.
Yeah, there was another one. This is before FCM, right? So I feel like I'm really old because I think you don't even know what is FC. What you don't even know what is before FCM, right? So, um,
I think somebody bought Firebase or
GCM or something. Yeah. No, Google bought Firebase.
was it what was it called Parse?
Yeah, parse. That's the one.
Oh, parts.
So parse was the only one you could do, and you could either run it yourself, I think, at the time. For sure, later you can run it yourself because you run it yourself now, or you can go through them. So originally, we had everything going through parse. So if you had an Android app, we would use parse because GCM was actually blocked, which was before FCM. I think it was called GCM, Google Cloud Messaging. Yeah, so wow, it's been a while since I've done this kind of stuff.
Yeah, push notification is definitely a pain.
I'm happy to hear that FCM is working, right? You can confirm that? Because what I remember that is that there was something else.
Yeah, totally. When I go back to China, Rivals just push notification part still works. Okay, sorry, I correct myself. It works on iOS. I don't know about Android. Sorry about that. At least it works on iOS because I don't use an Android phone. Uh, but I believe if you have Google services enabled Android phone, it probably works. I don't know about if you don't have Google services enabled um, on your phone.
Okay, I'm pretty sure it doesn't work, but I might be wrong. But let's say it doesn't work. I think the backup would be who is it? Who is the big phone company in China now?
Xiaomi, Huawei.
Yeah, Huawei. I believe Huawei has some kind of service that you can piggyback onto.
Mhm.
Anyways, this is just some tips for you guys if you guys are looking to get into China market. I think Huawei is the one to look at in case you need something like FCM in China. Okay, anyway, sorry. Let's go back to Flutter Desktop.
Oh,
We
no,
keep getting
don't
thrown off the
worry.
trail. Yeah. I think a lot of people are interested in China and how everything kind of works because it is a totally different
Mhm.
place compared to most other parts of the world. Um, okay, so yeah, playing with Flutter Desktop. Yeah, I agree. Right, you can easily slide the window around,
Mhm.
and you can do stuff like this for web. But two things: web, I think, is totally different in terms of how everything works, and for sure, hot code reload does not work in web.
Yeah, no, it doesn't work. That is very unfortunate. And also, Flutter Web is still very, very, very not stable. For me, it crashes a lot. Like as soon as you put some graphic intensive stuff on it, it just crashes. Like constantly, like, especially on mobile. Like Safari just doesn't handle it well. And it gets your phone really hot for some reason. Maybe I'm just doing it wrong. I don't even know. It's just huge load of JavaScript. I don't know.
I would not be surprised because I mean it's super intensive, but at the same time, I think if you don't change the way things work, it should be less intensive on your phone because depending upon what kind of browser you're using, you get different kind of styling, right?
I think by default it's that HTML render on mobile and then the Canvas kit or the WebAssembly one on desktop.
That's correct. But for sure, like actually, you're not the first one to talk about in terms of like it's better to work on desktop. One of our other guests also recommended the same as a tip to everybody,
hmm
and I also think so too. But there's some problems that you run into, right?
Right,
So
yeah.
because Flutter is cross-platform, doesn't actually make it truly cross-platform. Do you mind to talk about some of the issues that you run into while trying to go this route?
Yeah. So first of all, just some like, pods issues, like Coca pod issues, like dependency conflict, like things don't work, just like some whatever, like you might just have forgotten to like clean your derived data um, on Xcode, and just some magical things I don't understand that doesn't work. That's one part, and the other part is some just plugins that you're using, you know, don't support desktop, and there are lots of them. For example, a lot of Firebase plugins used to not support desktop. I think right now a lot of them are at least beta on Mac OS desktop, but a lot still aren't. And a lot of things you just can't really test on desktop, like push notifications, like you just can't really test on desktop. Um, Another thing that works a little bit differently is storage. So for us, we use Hive. I really like Hive, and it has been working pretty well. But it works slightly different on desktop. It has to store its files somewhere, right? And for me, like just for me, like sometimes like desktop Hive gets like a little bit funky. Like the behavior is a little bit different. Like when you try to like clear all data, um, like on mobile, sometimes it wouldn't clear, and sometimes uh, I don't know. I wouldn't say I really understand what's going on I just like I would just give the recommendation of like being like careful like when you want to just go fully on desktop. Like you always make sure that the app still works on mobile. Like every like take small steps and uh, before you write a lot of code. Just make sure it still works on your simulator or still works on your phone.
Yeah, so no matter what, always test on the real device at some point, right?
Yeah, the other thing is that sometimes when you work on desktop too much, you get carried away. Like you forget about oh like you're supposed to really work on mobile. Like there's a lot of things like you don't you'll be like oh the keyboard is supposed to pop up at this point, but like I made the screen to not really support more screen real estate, right? Like or sometimes you kind of assume like behaviors on desktop that doesn't exist on mobile or you forget about like mobile behaviors like for example like on text field like when the user is done with the text field um like what is the text field action button or you forget about like small details that desktop wouldn't require you to remember.
Yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah, that, and I mean also too. Yes, you can test nearly everything, but there's definitely some things you cannot test, right? Like double tapping or something or swiping. I mean, you can kind of, I think you can kind of do them, but at the same time, they're not so natural.
Hmm.
Um, I'm sure there must be more things like three finger touch, I guess would be something, right? There's some like extra touches that I don't think you can necessarily try. Um, yeah, what else was I going to say? But yeah. There's definitely a lot of things, but there's still a lot of things that you can definitely do. I think the biggest benefit is like you talked about before. It's like checking screen sizes and making sure things render properly. It's just so much faster on desktop.
Yeah, totally. And if you're like on your if you're traveling, just compiling on desktop saves a lot of battery if that's another plus. Because otherwise you have to have your simulator open all the time, and that's a big battery killer.
A big battery killer for your.
Oh, for your laptop. Sorry, for your laptop.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Actually, this is one of the few times I'm actually on a laptop. I really don't like laptops. I like desktop much more, to be honest. So at my office, I have an iMac Pro set up. I want to get a Mac Pro, but now it's if I buy it now, it's probably too old now.
You probably want a Mac Studio, maybe.
I do have a Mac Studio for something. It's pretty okay actually. So, but I think the next thing is I probably have to get myself a Mac Pro because I really love the desktop. I hate moving around. I want to sit down at a desk. I don't know about you. I feel like kids younger than me, like you like to lay on the couch and code, but I cannot focus like that. I have to sit at a desk like a rigid.
Hmm. You probably want to like wait for the Apple Silicon Mac Pros if you want to get those.
Yeah, that's something I'm taking a look at, but let's see what happens. That's another thing to talk about too, right? Have you actually? I don't think I've tried this yet. So I have a couple of M1s at my work. I haven't played with it extensively, but have you tried to play any of these like Mac apps on an M1 yet?
Yeah. So M1 works a lot faster, like extraordinarily faster. Like compiling Flutter apps, it's like so much faster. Um, I remember like probably like a while ago there used to be a lot of bugs on Flutter on M1, but now it's a lot better. Now you have like like Flutter ships with universal binary by default, and that is the binary that includes both x86 and ARM.
What I'm kind of curious about is like if you load like a native app from iOS onto your M1, right? So we're talking about Flutter Desktop. If you run an M1 app, a iOS app on your M1 computer, like can you actually tell that there's a big difference? Because I mean, you are going to be expecting some different types of inputs for some things at least, right?
Oh, actually, what happens is that the app wouldn't run for some reason. It would crash. I have no idea why. And I tried other apps, it was so crash. Like the HBO app crashes if you try to run the HBO apps on M1. Uh, maybe I don't know. Maybe there is some like iOS functionality that it requires, like maybe a subscription. I don't know. But if you're working on with a Flutter app and you try to run your Flutter iOS app on M1, and it crashes, it's really hard to tell like why. Because you're sort of you're sort of working with start and then you have no idea what's going on the native side. And I feel like that's definitely going to be hard to debug.
Okay. Yeah, because I'm just kind of curious about like what is the experience if I run like a native iOS app on my M1 compared to if I run like a desktop version of my mobile app onto there. Like, you know like is there a big difference or how do you like what do you feel?
Yeah, I personally don't have any experience because the um oh, or do you mean like running the iOS app, like iOS Flutter app in Flutter desktop, like if you compile to Flutter desktop?
Let's compare running a Flutter desktop app for Mac desktop versus an iOS app on an M1. Like, I'm just kind of curious about the two, right?
Oh, I see, I see.
Is there like a big difference that you can feel or no? Like, because I've never tried it before. I'm just kind of curious, right? Because right now, like, basically Flutter is known to be really great at like making mobile apps, right? But if I made an app for my computer and I ran an iOS native one, like, I'm just kind of curious, like, is there a big difference? Does it run better on iOS only, or
Um, I feel like it runs like really well just on both platforms. If you were to like run your Flutter app on M1 on just Mac, like things work really good because it's essentially just a beefier iPhone chip, right? Like the chip essentially is the same. It's ARM v8. And then like you get some weird interactivity things. Like for example, like sometimes like text field copy and paste doesn't work too well. Um, Text selection doesn't feel really native. Sometimes the cursor disappears. Sometimes like the text field will flicker. It doesn't work too well with Chinese input or with any, like input methods. Um, and sometimes Chinese text doesn't appear really good. There's some like small things like this that kind of takes you off. uh,
for Flutter desktop? You're saying
yeah, for the desktop.
really? Because I remember that they didn't want to release Flutter desktop until this stuff was straight, like at least for Chinese input, because you and I both know that China is really into Flutter compared to other countries, I think.
Yeah, I believe China is really into Flutter, but only mobile, not desktop.
I remember Chris Sales talking about this in particular that, hey, we're not going to say it's ready until like these things are done. And one of them was actually about foreign input, or sorry, when I say foreign, I mean like non-Latin based letter input, aka Chinese, Japanese, Korean, that these things are going to render fine. And I thought they checked the box on that one already, but you're telling me it's actually not quite 100% yet.
I don't think it's really stable, just from my experience. Sometimes, I'm not sure if you worked with a like a non-Latin input before, but when you're typing, the input box is supposed to show just right next to your cursor, right next to your beam. But then sometimes it wouldn't show it, right next to the beam. Sometimes it show it on the bottom of the screen. Just like it would work. Like you can make it work, but it's not the best experience. Sometimes it is a little like buggy. It definitely, like, you can definitely tell that it is not a native app. It's not a native Mac app. Like you can definitely tell that, oh, it's made by Flutter. And speaking of the Chinese community, I had like some experience or some insights on this, and I thought it would be interesting to share um on a Chinese like Flutter community. Because I would go to forums. I'm Chinese, and then I speak Chinese, and there's some companies that use Flutter a lot, like Alibaba. They use Flutter a lot. They have like the app, 闲鱼. That's their app for secondhand trading, and it's completely in Flutter. Um, and I tried it out. It works really well. It works, at least for me, it works pretty well. The animations are pretty smooth. Um, it feels pretty smooth. But the general like Chinese developer community, it's not really like all the way to like for Flutter yet. Like a lot of people really didn't like Flutter. Um, a lot of people just don't believe in Flutter, and like they probably, I don't know, like I feel like even for here in America, like a lot of people don't like Flutter. um, it's really interesting how like for at least for iOS development or Android development, you have people that sort of like okay with them, but they don't hate iOS or they don't hate Android development. But many people in China, they really dislike Flutter. Um, and I think the reason behind it is that you know it's like Flutter is this like technology that they had like previously they had bad experience with, and then they hear about people having bad experience with, and then they just don't try it again. But I think like still Flutter like still has a lot of things that give people bad experience, like the input method thing we mentioned. But I believe like Flutter team right now, the Flutter team needs to really like stop and really like focus on like fixing the small things, like quality of life things, instead of really trying to push all the platforms out. I feel like they had a really immature push on the Flutter web. It's still not, production ready yet, at least in my opinion. I feel like, and I really think Flutter desktop is not really production ready, even though they say it's stable.
Yeah, I guess it depends on how you call something production ready, right? I think that's something that I don't know if I've ever seen some kind of criteria list that said, hey, like these are the things that have to be done. I mean, nothing is ever really truly done, right? I mean, if that's the truth, then I think most companies like there would never be another developer working on Windows again, right? Like there's always ways to improve, bugs to fix, etc., right?
True.
So
Hmm.
I don't know what it means by that, but I forgot the wording that Chris Sales talked to me about, but something like they need to stand by it or something that they think it's ready. I forgot, but I think it's good to hear about what does it mean to be production ready. Um, yeah. So, and I'm a little bit surprised that you're saying that the Chinese is not quite correct or the way it renders is not correct. I feel really a little bit shocked. I haven't played too much with it. I've been lucky that I haven't had this work with the Chinese too much. But I think that's gonna. I didn't say like I should be pretty soon, but it just happens most of my clients are outside of Hong Kong, so it's been something that's not important. But yeah, I think with the mass amount of people in China working with Flutter, it should be important. If they don't grab that China market now, it's going to be like never. That because
Yeah,
once it catches on, everybody's doing it.
yeah. It's so interesting how like Flutter is supposed to, I guess, like compete with React Native now. Because I saw a Reddit post saying like, oh, Flutter is now more popular than React Native. But if you look at the jobs, there are barely any Flutter jobs, at least in the US. In other places, there are more. But still, like Flutter is like nowhere as popular as React Native.
Yeah, yeah. No, I agree. And also, React Native can also actually work on desktop too, which I thought was a little bit surprising. There's some desktop to it. Okay. But you're working with Flutter Desktop right now, right? Is there anything that's actually stopping you from moving forward, or actually you found methods or ways around some of the issues with Flutter Desktop for your new project?
Oh yeah, most of them I found or I found ways around it, and like there's one issue that's currently bugging me is that the lack of a rich text editor, and that is the current blocker for me. And I would love to hear about any like rich text editing solutions out there. I've joined all the Discord channels for all these like rich text editing communities. Okay, there's like visual editor because I think this is by this new company or whatever called Visual Space. They're working on this like social article thing, sort of like media. I'm not really familiar with that platform, but they forked Flutter Quill and they're currently working on that, but it's still kind of buggy. And there is Super Editor, and I feel like that they have a YouTube channel. They're like working on. I think they got featured on Flutter, or they got featured by Flutter, or whatever. It's called Super List, and they had this thing called Super Editor. It's also on pub.dev. And obviously you have Flutter Quill, you have Flutter Markdown Editor, but none of them are stable, and they are all pretty buggy. And it is really unfortunate to kind of run into this situation. I feel like, um, and for me, I don't see a workaround. I don't see myself building a rich text editor myself, and I would have to maybe sacrifice some functionalities.
Yeah, the only one I know that's super editable is that super editor. Matt has been on here quite a few times to talk about super editor. We also had superlist on here previously. So I think that may be your best bet, but I haven't played with it too much. I just know that it does seem pretty good. Like the videos I've seen of examples, they look pretty nice, but it depends on what you need to do, I guess. Then you know what's lacking or good or not good for you.
Yeah, it does look really promising. I heard him. I saw a few of his like talks. Um, like he talks a lot about like when we're using an editor, we take a lot for granted, like the text editing motions, how things work differently, on different platforms. There's a lot to actually unpack on like making an editor. It's an extraordinarily difficult task, and I really respect him for taking the difficult task. But definitely it's a difficult thing to like to get it right. You know, I think like the Flutter team just needs to like work on this. I know like we're using like open source software, like free software, like we're like bugging, or I'm like bugging the Flutter team, like please make this, but then I'm like using their software for free. I'm not even paying anything.
There's so many things to do and so many things I think that we don't even know about that it's hard for me to say, hey, Flutter team is to do this, Flutter team is to do that. The Flutter team is extremely small, I think, for what kind of product that they have. I think it's not proportional.
Mhm.
And so, I don't know, maybe this is something that the community should pick up and
Yeah.
then hand it off to them once we have something that's solid, which is what they've kind of been doing. I mean, they took over a couple of things already, but I mean, I don't know what their prerogative and what their priority is these days, but I don't think this making an editor is something that's super high up on their list, it seems, because most apps don't necessarily have that or even need that kind of functionality. Just enter text and that's it, and then you can already have that out of the box, right? So a rich text editor, I think, is quite specialized compared to other things.
Mm.
We did have a question from the audience. They're kind of curious about how old are you, because they say that you seem super smart.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate it. It just I have no idea what the things I'm actually talking about. Like when I'm talking about things, I'd be like just the stuff I saw from Reddit and stuff. And if you say those words in the right order, it makes me look smarter than I actually am. But I'm 22 years old.
Yeah, actually, I know what you mean. Sorry to kind of always overshadow you or whatever, but um, actually, what actually happens to me a lot of times is like I run into a problem, I work on it for hours until I fix it, and then one of my employees around me has the same problem, and I just go to his computer. I spend about 20 seconds. I fix it. He's like, "Whoa, how did you figure it out?" I'm like, "Dude, I didn't figure it out. I spent like 5 hours on this thing before. I'm not going to forget what the solution is because I spent 5 hours on it. I know what the solution is. I've done
Oh,
this.
I get you.
I'm not
Wow.
smart. I just remember what the solution is." So I can understand your side. It's like, hey, I read this online, so I know the answer. Like, it's not like I'm super smart. I read so much for so long.
Yeah, I always like read like Flutter Reddit, and I don't know, I just like really I'm just really passionate about Flutter. I don't even know why. It just seems a really appealing, framework to me. I guess people all have like favorite frameworks. People have like people love Angular, people love React Native, people love Flutter.
I don't know if I actually love React Native. I mean, I admit there's some people who do, right? But I think majority of people, especially if you're in Flutter, usually you don't love React Native. You left it for a reason. If you
True.
ever actually
Yeah.
tried it. My big thing about React Native was like, okay, upgrade this one package, and then everything was broken. And I'm like, fuck, I don't want to deal with this shit right now. That was me.
Yeah, web development is a whole like black hole to get into. There's so much stuff, and there's so much like nobody has the right way of doing it, and then everybody or like people spend 20 years like trying different ways to solve the same problem, and then people are going to like, oh, we should put everything on this client, and then people go back like we should do server rendering, and now people are going back, oh, people we should do client side rendering. It's like it seems to me like an infinite loop.
Okay, I think we're about to actually run out of time. Is there anything that you wanted people to know about Flutter Desktop, that maybe some tips or tricks, because you've ran into a lot of the issues already, right?
Yeah. I feel like some things that maybe like can save people time is that like if you ever work with Flutter Desktop, like start with Mac because that's the one that's gonna give you the least trouble and it's I guess the most stable one. Um, but always if you want your app to work on like different platforms, just make sure to test like every single step. Like as soon as you introduce a plugin that involves native code, or just like not even like maybe just as soon as you introduce any block a new code or a pubdev package, test it on all like you know platforms. Um, and yeah, otherwise you have to roll back, figure out what went wrong.
Yeah, it's good point. And also, yeah, be prepared to maybe switch over to beta or master
Mm,
because there could be some stuff that's fixed. I think now it's probably better since things are somewhat more stable, right?
yeah.
Cool. But how about maybe a shout out? Like, how can people get a hold of you? And also, like, what is something that you wanted to push out to people because you wanted to push your apps, right?
Oh yeah, totally. Like it would be really, I would really appreciate it if you can like check out the app I was working on with my friend Alina, and it's called Rivals, and it helps you like build habit. It helps you sort of like bond with your friends from doing things, and uh, like you can also check out my GitHub. I guess I don't have like much stuff on it. I just have my configs, but I love to share configs like dot files. I believe that's in the description, maybe. I don't know. I don't have the YouTube thing open.
Okay. And with that, yeah, actually, now that you mentioned it, I did see Alina Chiu, right? Because I seen she waved into the
Yeah,
channel on
that's,
YouTube. Yeah,
oh, she did?
the name didn't look so, yeah, it didn't look so familiar. So that's who that is. Okay, that's your partner, right?
Great. Yeah, I told her to like, oh, put on some links.
Cool. Well, I hope your guys' project goes well, and thanks for the tips for Flutter Desktop, because not a lot of people work with Flutter Desktop these days, actually. Mostly still with web and mobile.
It was very nice to talk with you.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. Maybe I'll have you back again in the future about what's going on with you, because it seems like you have a big future ahead of yourself in Flutter. That's good to hear.
Hopefully.
Great, thank you.
All right, have a great day.